I think you're doing this intentionally, Marty. While you're away, you're trying to tempt me with chocolates.
Yeah, the big lot of temptation required. Basically, the temptation as you set them in front of him, just eats them. there's no self denial at all. Yeah, I'll tell you what we're doing. 2 weeks ago, 10 days summer, so it's hectic. I was up with the tour up to Pitlochry, and we went over to wonderful, like I suppose it's probably sort of a bit cliched to say it's a bit like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but it's this place outside Pitlochry, and it's just this sort of haven to chocolate, and it's owned and run by Iain Burnett, who is a proper professional chocolatier. And we're joined with him now, and you'll all be revealing a wee bit why this is a connection. Iain, what a beautiful place you have.
Thank you very much. No, it's very much a family effort. Yeah, my wife is the one who presents the whole front of house, and I'm just back of house making the stuff. That's my job.
But you make it on a scale. I mean, everybody eats chocolate all the time, but your chocolate is professionally crafted and made. I mean, it's top tier chocolate.
Well, that was my passion, was to really, I'm a truffle specialist. Truffle or ganache, that's when you're combining, fresh cream, can be fruit, with chocolate. So that's my specialty, and I really enjoy the that side of it. I guess is the technical side, creating ganaches with particular textures, and flavors, of course, but naturally. That's what I enjoy.
We'll get on to mouthfeel in a little bit, because I'll tell you why in a little bit. But how do you become a chocolatier? How does that come about? Is there like a learning curve, or is it professional?
For me, it was about three years in a cold, dark room. Excuse me. About 3 years in a cold, dark room. That's where you got to start if you want to do chocolates well. I mean, you've got to have the conditions, right? But yes, I studied with 3 master chocolatiers. One was French schooled, one was Swiss schooled, and one was Belgian schooled. So I had a good background, but really the practice is what you need. You just need to spend a lot of time, eat a lot of chocolate, and and just work your way there.
Yeah. And now you've lots of awards in this. I mean, you've won loads of stuff, international chocolate awards and stuff.
Velvet Truffles have received over 60 national, international awards now. 3 times best truffle in the world at the International Chocolate Awards. So as much as what's in them, though, it's what's not in them. There's no glucose, sorbitol, the usual kind of fats, sugars, and additives that most hand-making chocolatiers, but certainly the big manufacturers will put in there to either extend shelf life or keep it kind of squishy in the middle. But it's when you don't put that stuff, it's not about being purist or organic, but when you don't have all that other stuff in there, you taste what is there. I mean, literally one of those, several of the truffles I do only have 2 ingredients. They literally have chocolate and dairy. That's it.
Wow.
And so you really taste the dairy. So your malts from your blended. Well, this is the single malt of the dairy world and the single malt of the chocolate world.
Yeah. Now, the reason we want to talk to you is because you do the whiskey pairings. I mean, it's a natural sort of pairing up between, if you're in Scotland, if you're going to do chocolate, whiskey lends itself very well to it. Now, you've worked with some of the big names in whiskey. I mean, Richard Patterson, you worked with him, and some other guys. What do you look for in a whiskey, and what do you look for in a chocolate that overlaps or contrasts each other? What's the process for this?
Well, the end and the beginning is the wow factor, frankly. But I mean, you know yourself, or anyone who's into their whiskies and been following whiskey for a while. There's been a lot done for marketing, basically. Oh, what should we do this month? Oh, stuck for ideas. We did haggis last month. Or how about cheese this month? Oh, I know, just do some chocolates. So a lot of people have had their fingers burnt, actually, because if you do a pairing like that, you're going to end up with cheapening, not just the chocolate, but you're going to cheapen the whiskey. You're going to smother flavors. So I think a lot of people are, as I say, fingers burned. So if you're going to do it really well, it's you can look at the tasting notes and so on, but really you don't know until you have that expression under your nose, as it were. You really So, for example, you can nose a whiskey, be like, wow, that's lovely. That's, you know, very spicy. There's a wee touch of fruit in the background there, and then, you know, you taste your chocolate and go, oh, that's a lovely chocolate. That's really nice. Got some really great flavors and textures there. And you come back to the whiskey and you go, yeah, that's a nice whiskey. That's a total failure. That's not a pairing. That's like a nice whiskey with a nice chocolate. So what is exciting is when I'm sat there with the master noser or the master distiller, and we're, you know, we nose the whiskey, we talk about that, and, you know, you've got those spice notes coming out, and then you taste that particular truffle, and sometimes they catch you by surprise. Sometimes we've done some funny kind of chocolates on truffles or pralines, and you taste that truffle, and you're like, yeah, that's really lovely. But when you come back and nose that whiskey the second time, it's completely changed. You've got, you know, those fruit notes that were hidden are coming right to the fore, or that savory note that you know is in there. You know, particularly if you really know that whiskey well, even for so it gets very exciting, even for the, you know, someone who's long in the tooth with their whiskies. You know, they know that part is there. Sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't. But with that particular pairing, it brings it right out. And obviously, it's the same for me with the truffles. You know, they begin to, you know, you know, some of these recipes take about 3 years to develop, but you end up with discovering new things about your truffles as well by the right pairing. So that the correct pairing is when you come back and you go, wow, now that's, you know, you look at each other, you're almost lost for words, you know, that's a real pairing.
Iain, what have you done that surprised you the most over the years? You know, is it the fact that everybody puts hazelnut with chocolate, but what have you paired with your chocolate that you've gone, that's incredible, why didn't we think of that before?
Yeah, that's a funny one. Well, you mentioned hazelnut. We do all kinds of funny stuff in the kitchen where we try things. Like once we were doing an aroma testing, and we were nosing lemongrass at that point and tasting hazelnuts, and that was a beautiful pairing. So sometimes you stumble across things that, and you look back and you go, wait a second, you know, in Thai cookery they've been using lemongrass for centuries for the same reason. You know, a praline or a hazelnut spread or gianduja is quite heavy, basically, so it's quite oily. So if you're going to put in some lemongrass, you actually bring that up. So that's an interesting one that we stumble across. Other ones are total mistakes. Like we were doing this effort once where we were making all these. The idea was to create all kinds of spicy chocolates, you know, like Ras El Hanout, were all Mediterranean spices, and we were going to take them to the Salon de Chocolat in London and let the public decide what we would make next, you know. And while we were doing all these funny flavors, we were doing a licorice one, and basically we burned it. You know, we it went pretty bad. Basically, it looked disgusting. It was like beige, you know. Can you imagine? It's very unappetizing. Anyway, so we're going to chuck that away. We had it on the side, but all just before I threw it away, some of the staff were like, no, don't throw that away. It's really nice. They've been all sticking their fingers in it and trying it. And anyway, so long and the short, we said, okay, we'll get rid of that. We'll get rid of that at the show. Yeah, we'll take that down there. So we were trying them on, you know, the public, and all these fancy truffles and chocolates and all these weird flavorings and hot, spicy ones. Anyway, they're all coming back saying, oh, that caramel and licorice one, where can we buy that? We're like, no, it's not for sale. We're just trying to get rid of it, actually. But you know, the long and the short, that one with a wee bit more finessing, that was awarded best white truffle in the world at International Chocolate Awards eventually. So you have some lovely mistakes as well.
It's like your man Bob Ross, the painter, said, "Happy little accidents, happy little."
Yeah, that's right.
but no, now we'll go on to the whiskey stuff, because you have individual pairings, and then you've got like a classic box. Off the top of my head, you have about 12 different actual pairings. It's a kind of easy way to just get where they put whiskey inside, like almost like a syrup inside the thing, and that to me is a bit lazy, if I'm honest. That's not really.
Exactly, and you wouldn't want to do that. I mean, the way I try to describe it, because people often, like when I started, we even worked with Diageo. Well, Diageo was owned Gleneagles at that time, and so the chef from Gleneagles came along and said, "Oh, yeah, well, we're owned by Diageo. You know, you'll have to do us a whiskey truffle." And I was like, "Oh, I'm really sorry, but you know, if you have a £500 bottle of malt, you know, can I put hot chocolate in the top of it? Would you let me?" You know, and I'm like, "Well, it's the same. If you have this amazing couverture chocolate, this pure dark chocolate that's got like fruity notes, spicy notes, last thing you're going to do is stir in some extract of alcohol. Yeah,
Johnny
but
Walker, yeah.
well, it's not even the actual alcohol. A lot of the time, it's like an extract. It's like a condensed version. It's not the real thing anyway. So if you're really going to appreciate that malt whiskey, that even a blended whiskey, a really good blend, you're not going to want to mix that in with your food. You're going to have that on its own to appreciate it.
Yeah.
Talk all about that. Then you're going to try this amazing truffle and talk about that and understand it and get all those flavors and textures out of it. And then you come back and to the whiskey again. And as I said before, things have moved, have changed, and that's really exciting. And so that's what I said I would do. A bit like for the Michelin chefs I service, it's that you look at their menu and what they're doing, and they're wanting something to go with that. So you're trying to create something that brings out their menu. In the case of a whiskey, that menu of flavors, that those characteristics, and that's where it gets really fun.
Yeah, so I sometimes think, how would you put it? That the PR people for whiskey companies don't really understand that there is lots of people who have professions outside of the whiskey world. They think everything's just all bung whiskey, that'll be all right. But yeah, there's a couple of very sort of polar opposite whiskies that you do. So you've got one for Talisker, Lagavulin, that sort of Highland peaty, briny notes, all the way over to your Macallans and your Glenmorangies. So I mean, these are poles apart whiskies, really. I mean, and sort of flavour profiles.
In that,
So how do you do that?
It's interesting. I mean, I've done, but now over the last 2 decades, probably we've done with these distillers, maybe, I haven't counted recently, maybe 250, 300 different pairings with different expressions. And each one is a real learning curve. You think, oh yeah, you read the tasting notes and it says this and this, and you're like, oh yeah, well, that'll be fairly straightforward. And then you taste it, it's like, it's not that kind of orange at all. It's actually all spice. And, so once you get it under your nose, you discover things about it. But it's usually it's not always. Sometimes like pick that orange and spice. You can come up with that orange note, and you'll maybe bring in a spice, like a spicy truffle, and maybe some cinnamon, and so together they make that a Christmas cake. So you can actually have, as opposed to a supportive note like bringing out the orange, you can have a complementary note which creates almost another flavor together, as they have them together. So you have different routes, whether it's supportive or complementary. But also you've got in that the box you mentioned, that's just a small selection of some which are quite diverse within those families, like whether it's the Macallan or something like Dalwhinnie, or even some of the Islay malts. You'll have a family of expressions from that distillery which have similar things in their nature. They may have a baseline that's very similar, but what you're trying to do with certain expressions is try to bring out why this one's different. We know that's an Islay, it's got the peaty note in there, but you notice it's also got a lot of orange in there, and so you're trying to bring out the orange on that one, whereas another one you're trying to bring out that peppery or that gingery note. So it depends very much on the flight. So what you're doing with it, if you're just saying one whiskey, well, actually then do a vertical. You can actually, as long as it's complex enough, interesting enough, but as long as it's got the depth of character, you can actually pair that first with a mild, maybe even a milk chocolate truffle, and you'll bring out the creaminess, which brings out the texture behind the whiskey. Then you'll move on and you'll try it with a slightly orangey one, and show the fruit notes. And then you can even have a third one, which brings out more of the savory notes, the spicy notes. So you can have that vertical effect where you're discovering different notes as you go along. You think you've got it, and then, oh, how about this? Oh my gosh, and how about this? And so people discover in that whiskey, in that single expression, these different notes can all, be separated out. That's fascinating. Other times, you're trying 5 whiskeys and you're trying 5 different chocolates, and you're trying to show that journey. But that box you mentioned is just some excerpts, if you like, that we've done over the years. But you do have some fun. There's certain things that do ring true. Like often you're more likely to get a nutty one to go with the for example, some of the Islay malts, some of the more peaty whiskies you'll get, or the I should say more maritime. When you got that salinity, exactly that kind of iodine, you're more likely to be able to bring in a hazelnut because almost the saltiness works well with it. Or even licorice. Licorice is a really funny one. The other one, that chocolate I just mentioned, you know, it sounds kind of weird, caramel and licorice root. You know, I'm not a big fan of licorice myself, so it has very little licorice, but it does that thing at the back of your throat at the end, where it's almost like it opens you up to savory notes. So there's a lot of whiskeys this wouldn't work with, but if that whiskey has got a genuine savory like spice at the end, if you have that particular truffle, for example, yes, you get those caramel notes and so on at the beginning, but it then opens up your palate. And if you wait, this one you can't, like, you know, have the chocolate and then swig the whiskey. You know, it's got to be, you have the chocolate, you've swallowed the chocolate, you've give it about 20-30 seconds, and then when you come back to the whiskey, it's completely opened up all those savory notes. So yeah, that's a long answer to your question, but yeah, you come up with a lot of interesting things along the way.
Yeah.
Tato, the crisp company here, I think you maybe heard of Tato. They actually did Tato crisp chocolate. I mean, is that something you would consider? It actually worked quite well. It was like it did.
No, it didn't.
You mean that salt?
Cheese and onion chocolate did not work. It was a total novelty. Justin ate it because it was chocolate. That was it. Didn't it?
No, most things dipped in chocolate are pretty good. But
yeah, that's very true. Very true. Do you have a process? You tell people how to do this. So how you do this with your chocolate is you nose the whiskey, bite the chocolate, wait, let it warm up, then nose your whiskey again, then drink. That's the process.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit like, I mean, you know, whiskey with your Coke or vice, you know, there's no hard and fast rules, but yes, if you nose first, if you then, you know, taste the chocolate, and obviously let it melt, you swallow the chocolate, and then come back, not in a hurry, but if you come back to nose first before you taste the whiskey, then you're generally almost all the time I find you get more out of it.
I think it just prepares your senses. It prepares everything just before you do it. I mean, a couple of guys said to me, "Do you ever drink a whiskey without nosing it first?" Probably not. Okay, if I'm watching TV and I'm not really caring that much, but if it's anything of class, I normally nose it before it, even just a quick before I sample it.
And I do that with people that don't drink whiskey or don't drink alcohol, full stop, you know, or they can't for whatever reason, and they'll do the nosing, they'll do the tasting, they'll do the nosing again. You know, as you know, from the way the palate works, you're getting 90% of it right there. You're getting a huge connection to all of those notes just by nosing alone.
Look, we touched a little bit on this a second ago. Mouthfeel. When I read tasting notes and all these guys doing reviews and so on and so forth, and they all talk wax lyrical about, oh, it's hollyhocks on a sunny morning, and then it moves over to tangerines and in a bedtime or whatever. Pretty much none of them ever mention mouthfeel, and I think it's so important. If you have a chocolate that's, and let's be honest, the food technicians at the big suppliers know this. If you have something that feels luxurious in your mouth, it covers up an awful lot of problems. And it's the same with whiskey. If you get that lovely viscosity, that lovely oiliness on a whiskey, it doesn't have to taste all that great for you to think this is a pretty good product. Now, you mentioned earlier on about, you know, that some companies leave in certain additives to give that sort of mouthfeel. How do you maintain that? Because I've always found with the higher cocoa content, it becomes a bit gritty. You know, some of the stuff becomes a little bit gritty. So that's why milk chocolate outsells dark chocolate so much.
It can begin to taste a bit like a protein bar, what I think.
But that
mouthfeel that you get from it.
You know, if you get really high cocoa content, it becomes a little bit grittier than milk chocolate. You
know? There's two things that come up there. One is, so what you're referring to is actually the mouthfeel has got two things. One is the cocoa butter, right? So as soon as you have, so what we're talking about here, by the way, is couverture chocolate. Couverture simply means pure. It means you've taken that bean, you roasted and crushed the bean, you separate that into your cocoa mass, your cocoa butter. That's basically your cocoa mass, is that the red the stuff with the flavor. It shouldn't be that brown beige processed stuff in the supermarket, but that red flavorful stuff. And you've got the cocoa butter, which has no flavor, but that cocoa butter, that's the expensive part. Everybody wants that. Cosmetics industry, chocolatiers, obviously chefs, you know, because that melts below body temperature. And the moment you do a compound chocolate, we don't just add sugar to that recipe, you add, you know, vegetable fats or, you know, other sugars and so on. You make it cloying, you make it fat, you make it heavy. You know, that's your supermarket milk chocolate, if you like. But you can even get that with dark chocolate. Even some of those fancy names of chocolate that we won't mention in the supermarket. You turn over the packet, look on the back, and you'll see butterfat, artificial vanilla, and you'll see other things added. Basically, it makes their job easier and as well as cheaper. But if you strip all of that out, the cocoa butter you have, when you taste a good chocolate which doesn't have all these additives, it dissipates really quickly in your mouth. And as I said, below body temperature, you don't have to chew it, you don't have to work on it. That cocoa butter disappears. And what does it leave behind? It's kind of like the vehicle for the flavor. It leaves behind the cocoa mass or the spice or the fruit, whatever you put in there with it. So it's almost like a delivery agent, the cocoa butter. So the cocoa butter content without any other stuff is one element of what you mentioned. The other is the conching, which connects to the plant material itself. But cocoa has a long journey, from the tree to the bar. And yes, all these people on this long journey have got to do a great job of the harvesting at the right point, the plant material, the terroir, just like wine, really important. But then you've got the fermentation of the beans, the drying of the beans, and then the grinding, the roasting, the grinding. But you then get to a part which is the conching, which is basically a really, really finely grinding. And that is like all these other steps I mentioned. There's always temptation to cut corners, make it cheaper. You got this conch the size of this room, which is got these water-cooled rollers. As you're trying to reduce the particle size below about 20, 30 microns. You don't get that grittiness you mentioned. But you also are trying to release the flavors which are in these particles, these cocoa particles. And if all of these people in all these different stages have done a really great job, it's a bit like growing tomatoes at home. You ever grow tomatoes at home? They taste like a fruit. You get them from the supermarket. Yeah. They're at best they're like watery. At worst they're kind of bitter. You're going to make tomato sauce with which one needs more sugar? It's exactly the same with cocoa. If all these people are looking after their cocoa really well, you can have a 71, 72% cocoa, as in like 30% sugar, which is sweeter than that one down in the supermarket that's got the legal minimum 40%, 60% sugar. And it's so bitter. Nobody likes it. Yeah. Or you have to be it's almost like cooking chocolate, but that's twice the sugar and is more bitter.
Yeah.
So that just tells you all you need to know about how that cocoa has been processed. So if it has been processed well, you don't need to suffer like you've been mentioning. You can have well-conched chocolate that's beautifully smooth, cocoa butter that disappears in your mouth and leaves you just the flavor, and a good flavor.
I have to say, I tasted the chocolates last week, and they were just super, sensationally good. I didn't have whiskey with me, which I was bitterly disappointed that I didn't have with me, but that'll be remedied. You have an online presence, so people don't have to travel up to Pitlochry, but if you can head up that direction, because it is beautiful up there. I mean, it's just gorgeous up there.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. And you can go burn off the calories by the river, the other side of the road afterwards.
Yeah, I got the fish ladder up past the fish ladder all the way up to one of the distilleries up there that has all the signs now. Stay out! Don't come near us! Stay out! They've changed big time. But you don't have to travel up. But if you do, it's beautiful, lovely cafe at the back. I don't tend to eat a lot of sweet things. I've sort of famously don't eat a lot of sweet things, but the stuff you make isn't saccharine sweet. It's not pumping sugar to make it sweet, so it's sweet in a way that's really palatable. It's really nice. All of that. But you do have online, so people can buy these. You ship them, send them out
all over the world.
All over the world. And you mentioned just before we come on here that yesterday was your busiest day ever.
It was. I haven't calculated ever, but certainly this year it was very, very busy. There was a lot of larger groups and people coming through. So so definitely make a reservation. If you're coming to do a chocolate tasting flight, then you definitely want to book for that.
Yeah, well, honestly, it's a sensational place. It's beautiful. The staff are lovely too, which is always nice. You're about to speak, Justin.
I never knew there was so much to chocolate. We've done the odd chocolate interview before, but the way Iain has gone through it is inspirational, I dare say. Iain, I mean, you're highly passionate about your chocolate.
I love the science behind it, because if you're going to rip out all these additives, you've got to understand what that cocoa butter, the cocoa mass is doing, how to work it naturally, which it takes us 2 or 3 days to make these truffles, but it doesn't have to. You can make a truffle in an hour at home, but it's not going to be that same consistency. If you're working with Michelin chefs, you've got to give them not 99 fantastic truffles and one which is
Yeah.
You know, they all 100 have to be spot on. So the consistency is hard, and I enjoy the science, and it takes the time if you're going to do it naturally.
Well, it shines through, to be honest. If you get a chance to go up, it is absolutely beautiful place. If you want to go online, Justin's going to put the links and stuff online. But I mean, the classic box. I mean, just running through these: Kalila, Lagavulin, Glenkenchie, Talisker, Bunnahabhain. Then you have whiskey pairings with Dalwhinnie, Glengoyne, Macallan, Lagavulin, Glenmorangie, Balblair. And I mean, as you say, this takes time, and you've done a whole load of these. I mean, we're just talking about the whiskey stuff. All the other stuff you do is fantastic, you know.
Thank you.
More power to you. Justin will put all the links on there. People want to bounce over and have a look. And certainly, if you're looking for birthday presents pour moi, feel free send them over. I'm always open to that kind of thing. But yeah, but even more so for my baldy mate here down by the side because he's more than happy all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, Iain, it's a pleasure talking to you, and I'll hopefully be over there in a couple of weeks again. So I look forward to that.
Great.
Justin, do you want to say anything?
I just want to say this is too much. We're recording this at 10:30 in the morning, and it's too much. It's too much for me.
It's a perfect time for tasting.
Oh yes, perfect time. I'll get the whiskey out.
I know.
Get the chocolate.
I should really do the coffee, and chocolate tasting this time in the morning. But anyway, listen. Thanks very much,
Iain. Thanks very much, and I'll catch up with you again soon.
You're very welcome. Thank you both.
Cheers.